Wabarakatuh everyone. My name is Andra Singh, National ID number S1119192, and today I'll be discussing on behaviorist and cognitivist theory for specific context, which is part B for assignment 3 for course ED 252. It has been noticed that mostly our traditional way of teaching are brushed aside to cater for Western ways of teaching and learning. As influence of Western culture on our formal education system in Pacific is quite a lot, and our traditional way of teaching and learning is being washed aside slowly. And further to that, it can be said that Western ways of teaching and learning has opened quite a lot of doors to understanding into child development and child psychology, and to that to conclude how a child's behavior would be. Question that child's development is based on the child's surrounding, where child learns from what he sees. By changing the child's environment, he can turn a child into anyone he wants. And whereas referring to B.F. Skinner, he states that uh, actually his theory focuses on motivation. By motivating a child, you can change his behavior. For example, if a child is like has passed the exam, and while giving him a reward, so he will try to pass again. And if a child has failed a exam, or he or she is continuously failing a exam, and by remove taking his or her privileges away, excuse me, will eventually change his or her behavior towards the studies, and how he or she behaves. Whereas one of the critical behaviorists was Ivan Pavlov, who discovered the behaviorist theory by giving while giving dogs the food. Like Pavlov identified the in stimulus in dogs, or like we can say that Pavlov identified the stimulus, the things that cause the dog to respond or behave was food. And while he thought while he tried giving the dog food, he introduced and separate incident to the particular stimulus, where dogs uh, to react to the stimulus was by ringing the bell. So once Ivan Pavlov started giving the dog food, he rings the bell. So once the dog was used to the ringing of the bell during the feeding time, Ivan Pavlov thought that why not try ringing the bell so that we can see that dogs are still salivating, or dueling once the bell is ring. So therefore, when he rang the bell, dog started to duel. So therefore, he has successfully identified and trained the dogs to react to different stimulus. And whereas when referring to cognitivist theory uh, is an is an example of the instructions in the classroom that are supposed to be organized, sequence, and presented in a manner that is understandable and meaningful to students. For example, while teaching a student and he or she is unable to understand the concept of how you are teaching, it it is much more it is essential that we should provide examples and visual aids like for it is easier for them to understand because as cognitism emphasize on uh, relation retention and recall through the through use of quality teaching practices. Example like creating a monographic devices and visual aids for students so that it is easier for students to learn and to identify which problem needs what type of solutions and to that we can say that while teaching we should have a better way of presenting the information and with that we should have a better way of students to visualize the information which we are passing on and with that we can say that if the student understands the scenario or the equations properly he or she will be able to retain and recall the same information when needed and looking at the western way of teaching and learning over the period it is an important method of teaching and learning at the moment which we can say in our education system as it has introduced us with new techniques and new technologies to start cooperating into our education system and where students can be much more efficient while learning these uh, techniques and applying them in real life. For example, computer during the traditional teaching, as students were not unable to access computer or they did not knew what computer is, and in this modern world, most of the thing is computerized now, and however, it is an advantage for students to learn computer, and if they are unable to learn how to use computer, then they are still in the dark ages. It, it can be said that, and unlike the traditional teaching methods, modern teaching methods are more efficient and keep students intact, and it maintains the interest of students by animation and videos and such as like visual aids and others. Uh, and modern teaching methods are less time consuming to the traditional ones where a lot of paperwork is needed and a lot of paper is wasted. And even the traditional teaching was uh, considered quite expensive at that time. Whereas now let's look at the traditional way of teaching and learning. Traditional way of teaching and learning is it does have a good aspects as because English being the second language for uh, us islanders, so teaching in vernacular is one of the good ways of learning. because a student learns quite students learn much more in their native language and actually sorry mother tongue, in their mother tongue. And traditional teaching methods uh, have many advantages. However, these advantages are the disadvantage for modern way of teaching. As I said earlier, that the traditional teaching and the Western way of teaching do contradict at times. And while the contradictions, if we can say that in traditional way of teaching, uh, it is believed that God created us in his or her or his own image, and whereas the modern way of teaching, it states that all human people from uh, animals. So the statement contradicts. Whereas it is much wise and much uh, important to take the both information from both the advantages from the both traditional and uh, modern way of teaching uh, to implement in our modern way of teaching and learning, as it can be concluded that our traditional ways are brushed aside to give way to modern way of Western ways of teaching and learning, whereas the traditional way of teaching and learning has its benefit, as a child learns best in their mother tongue, while Western ways of teaching and learning has opened doors to child epistemology and like learning both traditional and Western ways of teaching and learning. Sometimes it do contradict, and yet if we learn the hybrid of both, would we would have, have a wonderful. That concludes my assignment. Uh, to everyone. Thank you a lot for listening. Good night.